In a heated debate room, someone says, define the word triangle. A triangle is a shape that looks like a triangle. You will say that this is nonsense, it's circular reasoning. You can't define a word using the word itself. This person is guilty of circular logic, and so are you. In this video, I want to prove that you will always be circular when you try to define a word. Hence, you are exactly like our ignorant debater. And also, what can we do about it? I know that many of you are not going to understand this, but if you truly want to, you have to pay attention to every section of this video. I know that for many of you, it's already obvious, but before we continue our investigation, we have to start on solid ground. What is wrong with saying a triangle is a shape that looks like a triangle? Before we answer, you have to understand that the role of a definition is to help us understand the meaning of a word, and usually it has the form A equals B. For example, a tree equals a plant with woody stem that grows over time. In order to understand what a tree is, I have to understand what a plant is. So back to our definition. A triangle is a shape that looks like a triangle. And remember, the key role of this definition is to help me understand what a word means. So picture this scenario. I don't know what a triangle is. So I look at this definition. And remember, to understand A, I have to understand B. So in order to understand what a triangle is, I have to understand what a shape that looks like a triangle is. But since we said I don't know what a triangle is, I cannot possibly understand what a shape that looks like a triangle is. So using only this definition, I will never understand what a triangle is. Thus, the definition is useless and meaningless. Try to come up with a definition that is not circular. For example, cartography, the science or practice of drawing maps. You might say, everything's alright, I don't use the word cartography in the definition. The only words I use are science, practice, and drawing. Now here is a very important part where you have to pay attention. Not many people will understand this. If I want to understand the word A, then I would also have to understand B, where B is a word from the definition of A. So for example, cartography is A and B is science. But to understand B, I would also have to understand C, where C is a word from the definition of B. In our case, C could be study. But to understand C, I would have to understand D, where D is a word from the definition of C. And we can continue this process infinitely. But remember, we don't have an infinite amount of words. The English dictionary has approximately 170,000 words. So that means that eventually in our process, we will encounter the same word again. In fact, we will encounter it infinitely many times. And here is the loop. The circularity appears again. In order to understand A, I have to understand B, then C, then D, and eventually A will appear again. But wait, you might say this is just the theoretical stuff. It won't happen in reality. Let's actually make an experiment to prove this, even though our thought experiment was enough to prove it. Here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to code a script that takes an initial word, for example cartography, and then it looks in the dictionary at its definition. Then it takes a word from its definition and adds it to a list. Then it'll do the same thing for the next word and so on. Also, as a side note for the people who understand this deeper, I coded it to always try to add a word from the definition that is currently not in our list, if possible. That is, to exhaust all possible words. So let's run it. We have to specify the initial word, and here it is. After 101 words, we arrived at a word that is already in our list. And here is the chain. It's pretty long, but the first word to repeat was mind. And first, it occurred on the 74th position, and second at 122. Now, as a short recap of this section, we proved that every word's definition is necessarily circular. First, we had a theoretical framework, and then we did an experiment. What can we do about it? And there is no problem with that, because first of all, we didn't learn the meaning of words through definitions. You didn't learn what water means because of a definition. You learned by hearing others say in contexts where that liquid appears too. And once you have some words that you understand their meaning through experience, you can start using definitions. And even if they are circular, there is a great chance that from that long chain, you will understand a few words because of experience before you reach the circularity. We can also learn that there could be some words that we cannot define, but still they hold some meaning. Some people will argue that consciousness is not clearly defined, or free will doesn't have a non contradictory definition. But this doesn't mean that those words are meaningless just because of the lack of a good definition.